During our family trip, my daughter-in-law yelled at the hotel receptionist, "Don't talk to the old woman, she's just the help." My son let out a laugh. She had no idea that I was the owner of the resort. What I did next left her trembling. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story and tell me which city you're watching from so I know how far it reaches." I had been waiting for this trip for months. At 72 years old, opportunities for quality time with my son, Mark, and his family didn't come around very often. When he suggested a week in Florida, my heart filled with excitement. Perhaps I would finally get closer to Amber, my daughter-in-law, who had kept her distance during their 5 years of marriage. The 4-hour drive to the Serenity Shores Resort was filled with conversations between Mark and Amber about spa treatments, golf tee times, and expensive dinners, as if I wasn't even there. Every time I tried to join in, asking about the children or suggesting something we could do together, Amber would respond with short phrases while Mark ignored me completely. I should have noticed the warning signs, but I was so eager to strengthen our family bond that I didn't care. The Serenity Shores Resort was one of my greatest achievements, though my family had no idea. After my husband passed away when Mark was 12, I built my hotel business from the ground up. I started with a small bed and breakfast, working 18-hour days, scrubbing floors, managing reservations, and slowly grew until I had 17 properties across 3 states. I always kept my business separate from my family, wanting Mark to love me for who I was, not for my money. Arriving at the grand entrance, I felt that familiar pride, seeing the perfect gardens and the uniformed valets rushing to greet the guests. It had taken me 3 years to buy Serenity Shores, and another 2 to renovate it to perfection. Every detail, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers, had been my choice. Mark handed the keys to the valet, while Amber adjusted her designer sunglasses and smoothed her blonde hair. She was undeniably beautiful, the kind of beauty that comes from expensive salons and personal trainers. At 35 years old, 20 years younger than Mark, she made sure no one forgot it. "Remember," she told him as we approached the doors, "I want the penthouse suite. I don't care what they say about availability. Make it happen." Mark nodded without hesitation. It still surprised and hurt me how much he submitted to her will. The confident boy I had raised was now a man who couldn't act without his wife's approval. We entered the elegant lobby, and I couldn't help but smile at the familiar buzz of activity. Sarah, the front desk manager, looked up when she saw me. Her eyes widened, but I gave her a slight shake of my head. I wasn't ready for them to know who I really was. "Good afternoon," Sarah greeted warmly but with a professional tone. "Welcome to the Serenity Shores Resort. How can I help you?" "Reservation under the name Montgomery," Mark replied. "We should have the penthouse suite." Sarah's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she checked. "Here is your reservation, Mr. Montgomery. It's confirmed for our Serenity Shores Deluxe Suite, but the penthouse is booked for your entire stay." I saw Amber's expression harden, her jaw tightening, and her eyes flashing with irritation beneath her flawless makeup. "That is unacceptable," she snapped. "Do you know who we are?" "I specifically requested the penthouse when we made this reservation." Sarah remained calm, though her shoulders tensed slightly. "I apologize for any misunderstanding, Mrs. Montgomery. The deluxe suite is lovely and has a private balcony." "I don't want to hear about some second-rate room," Amber interrupted, raising her voice just enough for other guests to turn and look. "I want the penthouse, and I want it now." I stepped forward, hoping to calm things down. "Amber, perhaps we could." But before I could finish, she spun toward me, her face twisted in fury. "Don't you dare speak," she shouted, her voice echoing off the marble. "Sarah, or whatever your name is, ignore anything this old woman says. She's nobody important, just the help we brought along." The conversations in the lobby stopped. I felt my cheeks burn as humiliation washed over me, but she wasn't done. "Don't talk to the old woman," she screamed, pointing at me as if I were worthless. "She's just the servant, the nanny. Don't waste your time on her." I stood frozen, my mouth dry, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. In my 72 years, no one had ever spoken to me with such venom, with such utter disrespect, and never in front of strangers. But what came next cut even deeper. Mark threw his head back and laughed, not awkwardly, not to ease the tension, but with genuine amusement, as if watching his wife tear me down in public was the funniest joke he had ever heard. "Oh God, Amber," he said between laughs, wiping tears from his eyes. "You're terrible, but you're not wrong. Mom, just let us handle this, okay? Go sit down somewhere." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This was my son, the son I raised alone, the son I worked to the bone for and sacrificed everything to give a good life to, and he was laughing at my humiliation. Sarah's face had lost all its color, her expression a mix of shock and compassion that only made the wound burn deeper. Across the lobby, I heard whispers and saw people pointing. Some were holding up their phones, no doubt recording every second of this disaster. "Ma'am," Sarah said softly, her voice kind but still professional. "Perhaps you'd like to wait in our lounge while we resolve the room situation." Before I could answer, Amber let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "Yes, take the old woman somewhere she won't embarrass us anymore, and make sure someone keeps an eye on her. She tends to wander off." Mark laughed again, strangers stared, and I felt my heart break into pieces. I wanted to disappear, to flee from that beautiful lobby, from my cruel daughter-in-law, from my mocking son, and never come back. But something inside me, a final remnant of the strength I used to build this empire, held me steady. I met Sarah's eyes. Her own eyes showed a silent anguish. She knew exactly who I was. She knew that with a single word from me, they could have Amber removed so fast her designer heels wouldn't touch the floor. But I remained silent. Not yet. I picked up my small suitcase and walked toward the elevator, my back straight, despite the crushing weight of humiliation. Behind me, Amber continued to shout at Sarah about the penthouse, her voice dripping with the entitlement of someone who has never worked a day in her life. As the elevator doors closed, I managed to meet Sarah's gaze one last time. She gave me a slight nod, a silent message that she understood, that she was sorry, and that she was waiting for my signal. I had built this empire from scratch, employing over 300 people across my properties. I was respected in business circles, sought after by other hotel owners, known for my integrity. But in that lobby, I was just a pathetic old woman being screamed at by her son's wife while he laughed at my pain. As the elevator climbed to the 12th floor, each passing number stirred something within me. The pain was still sharp and deep, but another feeling began to grow alongside it. Determination. The next morning, I woke up in what should have been paradise, but felt more like purgatory. My room overlooked the ocean, with the waves gently caressing the pristine beach. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, colors that normally would have taken my breath away, but I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped me out and left only a shell. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear Amber's mocking voice. "She's just the servant." Mark's laughter replayed in my head as I wondered if I could have handled things differently, though deep down I knew the real problem wasn't my reaction. The truth was that my own family treated me as if I didn't matter. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Mark was standing in the hallway, looking awkward but showing no trace of remorse. "Mom, we're going to breakfast. Amber wants you to watch the kids at the pool afterward, so we can go to the spa." No good morning. No how did you sleep. Not even a hint of acknowledgement for what had happened in the lobby. Just another order disguised as a request. "Mark," I said quietly, "about last night." He waved his hand dismissively. "Mom, don't make a big deal out of it. Amber was just stressed about the room. You know how she gets when things don't go her way. Nothing." That's what he called the public humiliation his wife subjected me to. She called me the servant, Mark. She yelled at me in front of strangers. He shifted, avoiding my eyes. "She didn't mean it. It's just Amber being dramatic. Can we just drop it? We're supposed to be on vacation." I looked at him, searching for the boy I once knew. The little boy who would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who would bring me dandelions and call them sunflowers, who once told me I was the strongest person in the world. That boy was gone. He had been replaced by a 47-year-old man who chose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll watch the children." His relief was palpable. "Great. We'll probably be gone all day. Spa first, then lunch, maybe some shopping." You don't mind, do you? Of course I minded. I had imagined this trip would be about family time, getting to know my grandchildren better, and feeling like I belonged. Instead, I was being reduced to an unpaid nanny. But I nodded anyway. Saying no would only cause a scene. And I had learned long ago that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up. The breakfast restaurant was bustling with vacationers enjoying their meals. Amber had secured a table by the window, the best spot in the house, and was already barking orders at the staff as if she owned the place. "I want fresh squeezed orange juice, not that concentrate garbage," she told our waiter, a young man named Kevin, whom I remembered from other visits. "And make sure the eggs are soft-boiled for exactly 3 minutes, not a second more or less." I could see Kevin trying to remain calm, but the strain in his eyes gave him away. I had trained my staff to provide first-class service, but Amber was testing even their patience. My grandchildren, Lily and Leo, aged 8 and 10, sat silently at the table, their eyes glued to their tablets. They barely looked up when I approached. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said to Lily, reaching out to smooth her hair. But Amber's hand shot out to stop me. "Don't touch her. She just had her hair done yesterday, and I don't want it ruined." I pulled my hand back as if I'd touched a hot stove. Lily didn't even look away from her screen. "Kids, say good morning to Grandma Helen," Mark murmured without much interest. "Good morning," they said in unison, still focused on their devices. I sat down in the only remaining chair, the one with its back to the beautiful view. Amber had made sure the best spots were for her family, leaving me the leftover seat as an afterthought. "Helen," Amber said without even looking at me, "after breakfast, you'll take the children to the pool. Make sure to put sunscreen on them every hour. Lily burns easily, and if she gets even a little pink, I will hold you responsible." I nodded, holding back the words I wanted to say. "And keep them out of the deep end, and don't let them eat snacks by the pool. They're full of preservatives. Oh, and if they need anything at all, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." Each order was like a small cut, another reminder that she didn't trust me to care for my own grandchildren without her hovering over my shoulder. "How long will you be at the spa?" I asked. Amber finally met my gaze with a cold stare. "As long as we want. This is our vacation, not yours. You're here to help." Mark remained silent, his eyes on his phone, completely disengaged. I wondered when he had become the kind of man who lets his wife treat his mother like hired help. After breakfast, I ended up by the pool with Lily and Leo, trying to start a conversation while they remained lost in their screens. All around us, other families were laughing, splashing, and genuinely enjoying each other's company. We looked like strangers who just happened to be sharing a table. "Grandma," Lily said suddenly, and my heart leaped, hoping she wanted to talk to me. "Yes, sweetheart? Mom says you used to clean houses for rich people. Is that true?" The question was like a slap in the face. I had worked hard my entire life, yes. I never cleaned houses for anyone. I built my own empire from the ground up, created jobs for hundreds of people, and earned respect in a field dominated by men. And yet, in Amber's twisted version of my life, I was nothing more than a maid. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm a business owner. I build hotels." Leo looked up from his tablet for the first time all morning. "Mom says you make up stories about being important because you're embarrassed about being poor." The cruelty in his words took my breath away. Amber hadn't just humiliated me in public. She had been poisoning my grandchildren against me, filling their heads with lies so they would see me as a pitiful, delusional old woman. "Your grandmother is not poor, and she does not make up stories," I said, keeping my voice steady. Lily shrugged. "That's what Mom says. She says you live in a tiny apartment and pretend to be rich to feel better about yourself. In reality, I lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay, worth more than most people's entire net worth. But my grandchildren thought I was a pathetic old woman, living in poverty and lying about my life. For the next 6 hours, I sat by that pool, watching children who barely glanced my way, while their parents enjoyed themselves at my expense. Other guests made small talk with me from time to time, and I responded with short, polite chats, all while feeling more and more hollow with each passing minute. When Mark and Amber finally returned, They were glowing from spa treatments and an expensive lunch. Amber's nails were freshly manicured, her hair perfect. She looked like someone who had spent the day being pampered, and she had. In a spa that I owned, with services that I ultimately paid for. "How were the kids?" Mark asked without looking up from his phone. "Fine," I replied, because what else could I say? That they thought I was a liar and a servant? That their mother had deliberately destroyed any chance of a real bond between us? "Good," Amber said distractedly. "You'll watch them again tomorrow. We have golf in the morning and lunch with some friends we met at the spa." I watched my son nod along with her plans, never asking if I minded, never considering that maybe I wanted to spend my vacation doing something other than providing free childcare. That night, sitting alone in my ocean view room that I had worked so hard to make mine, I finally saw the truth. This wasn't a family vacation. It was a work trip where I had been cast in the role of the help. Except instead of getting paid, I was footing the bill for the privilege of being treated like dirt. But as I sat in the darkness, listening to the waves crash against the shore, something began to shift inside me. The hurt was still there, deeper than ever, but now it was joined by something else. Anger. Pure, sharp anger at being taken for granted, at the lies, and at being treated like I was worthless when I had built everything. Starting tomorrow, I decided, things were going to change. The third day of our vacation began just like the first two, with Amber dictating my to-do list while Mark sat by, nodding like a compliant aide. This time, they had planned a day trip to the nearby wine country, and I was to stay with the children. "Make sure they have lunch at exactly noon," Amber said, applying her lipstick with the careful precision of a surgeon. "And Lily gets cranky if her blood sugar drops, so keep the granola bars I packed handy." I wanted to remind her that I had raised a son before, that I knew how to care for children, but I had learned that defending myself only led to longer lectures and more pointed remarks. "We'll probably be back around 6, Mark added, without looking up from his phone. "Maybe later if traffic is bad." As they were getting ready to leave, I overheard Amber on the phone, her voice taking on that falsely sweet tone she used when she thought she was being clever. "No, we can't do dinner tonight. I'm stuck on babysitting duty again. I know it's ridiculous, but it's just for a few more days. Believe me, when this is all settled, we won't have to deal with this anymore." A chill went down my spine. The way she said "when this is all settled" didn't sound like she was just talking about the vacation ending. After they left, I took the children to the hotel's kids club, a program I had created myself to give families more flexibility during their stay. The caregivers were wonderful with Lily and Leo, and for the first time since we arrived, I saw them laughing and playing with other kids their age. With a few hours to myself, I walked the property. It had been years since I'd seen my hotel from the perspective of a guest rather than an owner, and I wanted to get a real sense of how things were running. That's when I heard the conversation that changed everything. Walking past the pool bar, I recognized voices coming from one of the private cabanas. Mark and Amber were supposed to be on their wine tour, but there they were, hidden behind the canvas drapes, speaking in low tones with another couple I didn't know. "The thing is," Amber was saying, "she's getting old, and old people don't live forever, if you know what I mean." A woman I didn't recognize laughed. "Amber, you're awful." "I'm practical," Amber replied. "Mark is an only child, so it's all going to come to us eventually. The only question is how long we have to wait." My stomach turned to ice. I moved closer, hiding behind a large palm tree. "What about the old lady?" the unfamiliar man asked. "Doesn't she have any money of her own?" Then I heard my son's voice, the voice I once trusted completely. "Mom? Of course not. She's dirt poor. Lives in a tiny little apartment, scraping by on Social Security, and I've been supporting her for years." The lies flowed from his mouth so smoothly, I wondered how long he'd been telling them. I lived in a $2.5 million penthouse, earning more from my investments each month than most people make in a year. But in Mark's twisted narrative, I was a burden he generously supported. "That's why this trip is so annoying," Amber continued. "We have to drag her everywhere because she can't afford anything on her own. It's like having a pathetic pet you can't get rid of." The other woman made pitying noises. "How awful for you, and I bet she thinks you'll take care of her when she's really old and sick." "Over my dead body," Amber said with a vicious laugh. The second she needs real care, she's going straight into a state-run home. I'm not turning my house into a hospice for some useless old woman. I leaned against the palm tree to keep my balance. They weren't just talking about letting me die naturally. They were planning to dispose of me the moment I became an inconvenience. But Mark's next words were what shattered me. The funny thing is, she still thinks she's important, he said, his voice laced with cruel amusement. She tells these crazy stories about owning businesses and being successful. It's almost sad how delusional she island dementia, the other man asked. Maybe, Mark said. Or maybe she's just desperate to believe she matters. Either way, it's embarrassing. She even told the kids yesterday that she owns hotels. Hotels? Can you imagine? They all laughed, and the sound cut through me like shards of glass. Well, Amber said, at least we won't have to listen to her crazy stories for much longer. I give her maybe 5 years, 10 tops, and then we'll finally be free to live our lives without pretending to care about a useless old woman who never did anything with her life. I stood there, behind that palm tree, feeling my entire world collapse. This wasn't just idle chatter about an unfortunate relative. This was my own son and his wife, talking about my death as if it were a long-awaited vacation. The best part, Amber added, is that she's so grateful for any scrap of attention we give her. Like this trip, she actually thinks we invited her because we wanted her here. She has no idea. We only brought her along to watch the kids so we could have fun. More laughter, more casual cruelty. Does she even chip in for expenses? The other woman asked. Are you kidding? Amber scoffed. She's completely useless when it comes to money. Mark covers everything, her groceries, her utilities, even this trip. She's nothing but a drain on us. Another lie. For years, I had been helping Mark financially, covering part of his mortgage, paying for his children's private school, even funding Amber's shopping sprees. The credit card statements that came to my address were staggering, yet I paid them without complaint, thinking I was supporting my family. The only good thing about having her around, Mark said, is that she's a decent babysitter. Free childcare, you know. She's so desperate for our approval, she'll do whatever we ask. It's actually kind of funny, Amber added, watching her try so hard to make us like her. She brings expensive gifts for the kids, always offers to help with whatever we need. It's pathetic, really, but useful. I had heard enough. More than enough. I stumbled away from the cabana, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not where they might see me and realize I knew what they really thought. I made it back to my room before the dam finally broke. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I let the full weight of it hit me. My son, the boy I raised alone after his father died, the one I worked 18-hour days to provide for, thought I was a useless burden he couldn't wait to be rid of. My daughter-in-law, who had smiled through 5 years of dinners and holidays, saw me as nothing more than free labor and a convenient scapegoat. And my grandchildren, innocent as they were, had been taught to see me as a liar and a drain on their family. In that hotel room, in my hotel, built with my money and my labor, I realized I had been pouring love and resources into people who not only didn't value it but actually resented me for it. The phone rang, jarring me from my dark thoughts. It was the front desk. Mrs. Montgomery, this is Sarah from reception. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I just wanted to check if everything is all right. A few of the staff mentioned they were concerned about you. The genuine concern in Sarah's voice, from someone who was practically a stranger, made me realize just how starved I was for basic kindness. I'm fine, Sarah. Thank you for asking. Are you sure? If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable. I almost laughed at the irony. One of my own employees, someone I paid to serve guests, was showing me more respect than my own family had in years. Actually, Sarah, there is something you can do for me. Of course. What do you need? I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me, the ground beneath my feet finally settling. I need you to prepare a detailed list of every single charge made to my son's room. Meals, services, extras, everything. I want a complete report. There was a pause. Of course. May I ask what this is regarding? Let's just say I'm starting to see things more clearly than I have in a long time. After hanging up, I walked to the window and stared out at the ocean as the sunset painted the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. It was breathtaking. But for the first time in 3 days, I wasn't just admiring the view. I was planning. My family had decided I was nothing, just a poor old woman they had to tolerate until I was gone. They were about to find out exactly who they were messing with. That evening, Mark and Amber returned from their supposed wine tour, tan and pleased with their day of deceit. They strolled into the hotel lobby like royalty returning from a conquest, unaware that I had heard every ugly word they'd exchanged by the pool. "Mom," Mark said, spotting me in the lounge with the children. "How was your day?" "Hope the kids weren't too much trouble." Yesterday, I might have believed the fake concern in his voice. But now I heard it for what it was, a performance to maintain the illusion that he cared. "They were angels," I replied calmly, though my chest was tight with rage. "We had a great time at the kids' club, didn't we?" Lily and Leo nodded distractedly, already turning back to their parents, as if I ceased to exist the moment they walked in. "Perfect," Amber said, barely looking up from her phone screen where she was checking her reflection. "We're going to try that new seafood restaurant downtown. You don't mind staying in tonight, do you? The kids need to get to bed early anyway." It wasn't a question. It never was. "Of course," I said, the bitter taste in my mouth. While they got ready for another night out without me, I slipped away to make a call. In my room, I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "David, it's Helen Montgomery." David Stone had been my business lawyer for 15 years, a shark who knew the legal and practical sides of running a hotel empire. If anyone could help me pull this off, it was him. "Helen, what a pleasant surprise. How's retirement treating you?" I almost smiled at the word retirement. I had stepped back from day-to-day operations, but I was far from retired. "David, I need some information. Hypothetically, if someone were fraudulently using credit cards linked to my accounts, what legal action could I take?" There was a pause. "That sounds awfully specific for a hypothetical. Are you in some trouble?" "Let's just say I'm considering making some changes to my financial structure. And what if they are family members who are authorized users, but who are lying about where the money is coming from? Helen, if someone is committing credit card fraud on your accounts, it's a serious felony. Even if it's family. Are you telling me that's what's happening?" I stared out at the ocean, watching the moonlight flicker on the waves. "I'm telling you that I'm done being taken advantage of, and I want to know my options." For the next half hour, David walked me through exactly what I could do. It was both sobering and liberating. I had far more power than I realized, and Mark and Amber had made far more mistakes than they could ever imagine. After hanging up, I called Sarah at the front desk. "Mrs. Montgomery, how can I help you?" "Sarah, I need you to prepare a complete report for me. Every service my son's family has used since their arrival. Every special request. Every interaction with the staff. Of course. Is there a specific reason?" I chose my words carefully. "Let's just say I'm reviewing our guest service quality. I want to make sure procedures are being followed." "Of course. I'll have it for you in the morning." The next morning was gray and heavy, matching my mood. I had barely slept, my mind racing with plans, but for the first time in days, I felt focused instead of helpless. I met Sarah at 7 o'clock in the morning, before Mark and Amber were awake. The report she handed me was worse than I expected. "Your daughter-in-law has made 17 complaints since her arrival," Sarah said in a low voice. "She has demanded room changes, special meals, and has been rude to several members of the staff." I flipped through the pages, reading account after account of Amber's entitled behavior, berating a housekeeper for how her shoes were arranged, sending back 3 meals for not being perfect, demanding the pool be cleared so Lily and Leo could swim alone. "And my son?" I asked. Sarah's voice was even. "He has been less involved, but he has backed her up on every complaint and demand." Of course he had. Mark had become an expert at enabling Amber's worst impulses while keeping his own hands clean. Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice even more. "There's something else. Yesterday, when they thought no one was listening, Mrs. Montgomery had a lot to say about the hotel's management." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She told another guest that the service was fine, but claimed the owners were probably some old-money family who didn't care about quality anymore. She said she could run this place better than whoever was in charge. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Thank you, Sarah. This is very helpful. On my way back to the elevator, I ran into Kevin, the young waiter who had served us at breakfast. He looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Montgomery? He managed in a quiet voice. I hope you don't mind me saying, but I wanted you to know that the staff has noticed how your family treats you. I stopped in my tracks. What do you mean? Kevin glanced around to make sure no one else could hear. We all know who you are, ma'am. You've always been so kind to us. But to see the way they speak to you, the way they treat you like you're not important. None of us think it's right. His loyalty, when he had no reason to defend me, cut deep. These were people who respected me, who valued my leadership and sense of fairness. The contrast with my own family was stark and painful. Thank you, Kevin. That means more than you know. He nodded. If there's anything any of us can do, actually, their island. Continue to give my son's family excellent service, but also write down everything. Everything they do and say. Can you see to that? Of course. For the next 2 days, I shifted roles. I was no longer the silent observer watching Amber issue commands and Mark ignore me. I was the sharp-eyed businesswoman who had built an empire by reading people's intentions and their flaws. And what I saw was worse than I had imagined. Amber wasn't just entitled, she was cruel. I watched her bring a young housekeeper to tears for not folding the towels exactly to her liking. I saw her throw a full-blown tantrum because the poolside service was slower than she wanted, screaming at a server who was clearly doing his best. Mark didn't just enable it, he encouraged it. He would laugh at Amber's nastiest comments about the staff, add his own complaints, and treat the people who worked for me as if they were beneath him. But it was how they treated Lily and Leo that finally broke my patience. I was watching the children play in the pool when Lily scraped her knee on the rough edge of the diving board. It was a tiny cut, barely bleeding, but she cried, looking for comfort. When Amber arrived, she didn't comfort her daughter. She stormed over to the lifeguard, berating him for not preventing the accident. Then she turned on me. "This is your fault," she snapped. "I told you to watch them carefully. If you had been paying attention instead of daydreaming, this wouldn't have happened." Lily was still crying, but her parents were too busy assigning blame to notice. I knelt beside her, gently cleaned the scrape, and applied a bandage from the first aid kit as she leaned into my shoulder, sobbing. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "You're very brave." "Grandma Helen?" Lily asked softly. "Why doesn't Mommy like you?" The innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. Even at 8 years old, she had noticed what I was trying to ignore, that her mother's hostility toward me was plain to see. Before I could answer, Amber's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Lily, get away from her right now. I told you not to get too close to your grandmother. She won't be around for much longer, anyway." The sheer cruelty of those words, aimed at both me and her own child, was the breaking point. That night, I made a series of phone calls that would change everything. I called David again, this time with precise instructions. I contacted my accountant for specific financial records, and then I spoke with John Peterson, the general manager of my hotel chain, with immediate orders. When I hung up the last call, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed older than her 72 years, worn down by days of humiliation and emotional abuse. But in her eyes, something was back that had been missing since this nightmare vacation began. Power, and an unbreakable resolve to use it. Tomorrow would be our last full day at the resort. Mark and Amber were expecting one final, perfect opportunity to treat me like an employee while they enjoyed themselves at my expense. They had no idea they were about to find out exactly who they had been pushing around. The last day at the Serenity Shores Resort dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect beach day that filled our brochures and kept guests coming back year after year. But as I prepared for what I knew would be the most significant day of my life in decades, the perfect weather felt almost like a mockery. Amber had pulled out all the stops for our farewell dinner, booking the hotel's most exclusive private dining room overlooking the ocean, at a cost for a single evening that was more than most people earn in a month. Of course, she had no idea that every dollar she was spending was coming directly from my accounts. Mark had been running up charges on credit cards I had foolishly allowed him to use. "Tonight is going to be perfect," Amber announced at breakfast, her voice laced with the smug tone I knew all too well. "I've invited some of the wonderful people we've met this week, the Hendersons, the Martins, and that lovely couple from Boston." Mark nodded like a proud husband. "Sounds great, honey. Mom, can you keep the kids entertained during dinner? They get restless with adult conversation." Even on our last day, I was being shunted aside, put on childcare duty while strangers enjoyed a lavish dinner that I was paying for. "Of course," I murmured, though inside, something was hardening into unyielding resolve. I spent the morning finalizing the last details. David had worked through the night to ensure every legal angle was covered. John Peterson had discreetly briefed the necessary staff on the truth. I practiced my lines in front of the mirror until I could say them without my voice trembling. At 3 o'clock, the call finally came. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Detective Miller with the local police department. We've reviewed the financial records your attorney sent over. With the evidence of unauthorized charges and misrepresentation, we can proceed whenever you give the word." "Thank you, Detective. I'll call you when it's time." The afternoon passed slowly. Amber spent hours getting ready, transforming herself into the picture of high-class elegance she wore like armor. Mark pressed his best shirt and polished his shoes, ready to play the part of a successful businessman for his new friends. Neither of them asked me what I planned to wear or if I needed any help. To them, I was just the help, and the help didn't need to get ready for their big night. At 7 o'clock, we convened in the Horizon Room, my resort's most stunning dining space. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a spectacular view of the ocean, with a private balcony for catching the salt-laced breeze. Crystal chandeliers bathed the tables in a warm glow, each one dressed in fine linens and china. I had chosen everything in that room, from the hand-painted murals to the imported marble floors. It was designed to celebrate life's finest moments. Tonight, it would be used for something very different. The other guests were already there, 6 elegant couples clearly charmed by Amber's social grace and Mark's confident demeanor. They greeted me politely, but their focus was on Amber and Mark, giving me little more than a nod. "Everyone, this is Mark's mother," Amber said, gesturing to me with the same flat enthusiasm one might use to introduce a necessary but unattractive piece of furniture. I had spent the entire week helping with the children, playing the part of a hired nanny rather than a vacationing relative. The conversation flowed around me as one elegant course after another was served. Amber sat like a queen, holding court with tales of her travels and grand plans. Mark played the part of the devoted husband, laughing at her jokes and adding little flourishes to make them seem more sophisticated and successful than they truly were. I sat at the other end with Lily and Leo, cutting their food and keeping them entertained so the adults could enjoy themselves. Whenever the children asked normal questions or made harmless comments, Amber would shoot me hard looks, as if their typical behavior was somehow my fault. "Helen," she said during a lull in the chatter, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "could you take the children out to the balcony? They're getting a bit restless, and I'd hate for them to disrupt everyone's meal." It was exactly what I had been waiting for: her public dismissal, her casual cruelty in front of everyone. With all eyes on me, the stage was set. I rose slowly, placing my napkin carefully on the table, and walked to the head of the table where Amber sat in her borrowed glamour, oblivious that her world was about to come crashing down. "Actually, Amber," I said, my voice firm and carrying across the room, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The table fell silent. Amber looked at me with irritation, not concern, annoyed that I had interrupted her performance. "What are you talking about? I asked you to take the children outside." "I know what you asked me to do," I replied, moving to stand behind her chair. "Just like I know about your conversation by the pool cabana 3 days ago, the one where you discussed how much longer you think I have to live and how happy you'll be when I'm gone." The color drained from Amber's face, but she forced a brittle laugh into the charged air. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You must have misunderstood." "Did I misunderstand when you called me a useless old woman? Or when you said you'd have me locked away in a state facility the moment I became an inconvenience? Or perhaps I misheard when my own son laughed and said I was delusional for claiming to own businesses?" Mark was staring at me now, his expression shifting from surprise to panic. Around the table, the guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, wishing they were anywhere else. Mark's voice was tight, a warning tone. Mom, maybe we should discuss this in private. I didn't take my eyes off Amber. I think we've had enough private conversations. It's time for the truth to come out in public. I pulled a thick folder of documents from my handbag. The rustle of paper echoed in the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I said to the entire table, allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Helen Montgomery, and I am the owner and founder of the Montgomery Hospitality Group. A gasp went around the room. One woman covered her mouth. This hotel, the Serenity Shores Resort, is one of 17 properties I own. The dinner you are eating, the rooms you are staying in, the staff who serve you, it all belongs to me. Amber's mouth opened and closed like a fish, and Mark sat frozen, ashen-faced. For the past week, I continued, my voice growing stronger, I have been humiliated, belittled, and treated like an employee by my own son and his wife. They have told you, my grandchildren, and anyone who would listen, that I am a poor, delusional old woman who makes up stories of success just to feel important. I opened the folder and pulled out a set of papers. This is the deed to this hotel. This is my corporate registration. These are the financial statements showing my net worth $45 million. And this, I said, holding up the final paper, is a record of every single expense Mark and Amber have charged to the credit cards I gave them, thinking I was helping a family who cared about me. The room was completely silent. Even the children sensed the weight of the moment. $156,000 in the last 6 months. Spa days, shopping sprees, luxury dinners, exclusive vacations, all on my accounts, while they told people I was broke and that they were supporting me out of charity. Amber finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Helen, please let me explain. Explain what? I cut in. Explain how you yelled at my staff, called me the servant, and told them not to waste their time speaking to me? How you've spent years turning my grandchildren against me, telling them I'm a liar and a burden. How you planned to put me in a state institution the moment I became inconvenient. Mark's voice trembled when he finally spoke. Mom, we can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding. I turned to the son I raised alone, the man I had loved and supported for 47 years. No, Mark, this is not a misunderstanding. This is exactly what you wanted, a mother content with scraps of attention, willing to provide money and free childcare with no expectation of respect in return. You wanted someone you could exploit without facing any consequences. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved earlier. Detective Miller, this is Helen Montgomery. Yes, I'm ready for you to come now. The shock was immediate and brutal. Amber shot up from her chair so fast she knocked over her wine glass, the red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. You called the police? She shrieked, her composure completely gone. You called the police on your own family? I called the police on people who have been defrauding me, I corrected. The fact that we're related doesn't change the law. Mark was on his feet too, his hands trembling as he moved toward me. Mom, please, think about what you're doing. Think of the children. They don't deserve to see their parents arrested. You should have thought of the children before you taught them to despise their grandmother, I answered. You should have thought of them before you decided their inheritance mattered more than their relationship with me. The guests began to gather their things, eager to escape the unfolding disaster. I couldn't blame them. This was not their fight, and they didn't deserve to be caught in our private nightmare. As they filed out, offering awkward goodbyes that no one believed, Amber made one last, desperate attempt to regain control. You're making a huge mistake, she hissed, her face distorted with rage and fear. We're your family. We're all you have. If you do this, you'll be alone forever. I looked at her, the woman who had spent 5 years methodically destroying my bond with my son and grandchildren, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Pure, absolute peace. Amber, I said softly, I have been alone for years. The only difference is that now it's my choice. Footsteps echoed in the hallway as Detective Miller and his partner arrived. When they entered the dining room, their presence seemed to shrink Amber and Mark, transforming them from confident, arrogant manipulators into cornered, frightened animals. Mrs. Montgomery? Miller asked kindly, are these the individuals you wish to press charges against? I looked at my son one last time, searching for any hint of remorse, any spark of the boy I raised. but all I saw was pure hatred. His mask was gone. "You vindictive old bitch," he snarled. "You're tearing this family apart over money." And in that moment, I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was doing the right thing. The legal process that followed moved faster than I expected. David had prepared our case so thoroughly that Mark and Amber's lawyer, ironically paid for with my own money, advised them to take a plea deal rather than risk a trial. The charges of credit card fraud and financial elder abuse carried severe penalties. But the real blow was the public exposure of their lies. Within a week of their arrest, local newspapers picked up the story. "Hotel heiress uncovers family financial fraud during vacation." Read the headline in the business section. The article detailed how a successful businesswoman had been systematically exploited and defrauded by her own son and daughter-in-law, painting a devastating and entirely accurate picture. I gave no interviews and sought no publicity. I didn't have to. The facts spoke for themselves. Mark and Amber were banned from all Montgomery hospitality properties, their credit cards canceled, their access to my accounts revoked, and the mortgage payments I had been covering were immediately cut off. Within a month, they had to sell their house and move into a small apartment on the other side of town. But the financial hit was nothing compared to the social fallout. The story spread through their circles like wildfire. The country club membership I paid for was terminated. The private school Lily and Leo attended, with tuition covered by Grandma Helen, demanded immediate payment of back fees or the children would be unenrolled. The friends who once enjoyed lavish dinners and holidays on my dime suddenly had no time for Mark or Amber. I watched from the quiet of my penthouse, feeling only relief. 3 months after that disastrous dinner, I received a letter. The return address was Mark's new apartment, and the handwriting was Amber's, shaky and desperate compared to her usual perfect script. "Dear Helen," it read, "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us for our mistakes. We have learned our lesson and want to make amends. The children miss their grandmother terribly, and Mark now realizes how wrong he was to let me come between you. Please, give us another chance to be the family you deserve." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and filed it away with the police reports and court documents. It wasn't an apology. It was another attempt at manipulation, another way to get at my resources now that theirs had run dry. The real Mark, the one who called me a vindictive old bitch when he was held accountable, had already shown me exactly who he was. Amber's letter only confirmed that they had learned nothing, except that their choices had consequences. I never replied. Instead, I began to build the life I should have been living all along. I sold 2 of my smaller properties and used the money to create the Montgomery Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to stopping elder abuse and supporting seniors who have been abandoned by their families. The foundation's headquarters took up the top floor of my newest hotel in downtown Miami, and I threw myself into the work with an energy I hadn't felt in years. The foundation became my real family. Dr. Linda Vargas, a gerontologist who took the role of medical director, was like the daughter I never had. Sergio Ortiz, our advocacy lawyer, reminded me of what Mark could have been if he had chosen integrity over entitlement. Sofia Ramos, who ran our support groups, was a survivor of financial exploitation by her own family and knew all too well the sting of betrayal from those you love. Together, we helped dozens of seniors reclaim their lives and their dignity. We offered legal aid, financial counseling, and most importantly, a community that understood that family meant more than blood. My grandchildren remained a source of pain, but time began to soften that wound. Lily and Leo were young enough that perhaps the poison from Mark and Amber wouldn't stick forever. I set up trust funds to pay for their college educations, to be managed by the foundation when they turned 18. If they reached out to me by then, knowing the truth of what had happened, I would welcome them with open arms. If not, they would still have the security I always wanted for them. A year after the showdown at the Serenity Shores Resort, Sarah, my former receptionist, now promoted to general manager, called to see if she could visit. "Mrs. Montgomery," she said as we sat on my balcony overlooking the bay, "I wanted you to know that the staff at Serenity Shores has never forgotten what happened that week. The way your family treated you, and the grace with which you handled it, has become something of a legend among our employees." I smiled, thinking of Kevin and the others who had shown me loyalty and kindness. They were good people. They deserved better than to witness that disaster. There's something else, Sarah continued. We've had several inquiries from guests who heard about the foundation, people who are dealing with similar issues in their own families. They've asked if there could be programs at the resort that could help them. That conversation sparked our most successful project to date. The Reclaim Your Life retreats became week-long programs at Serenity Shores, combining luxury stays with therapy, legal clinics, and peer support groups. Seniors who had suffered financial or emotional abuse from their families could come to heal in the same beautiful place where I had found the strength to fight back. The irony was perfect. The dining room where Mark and Amber had planned my final humiliation was transformed into a space where survivors shared their stories and found their voices. The pool where I had overheard their cruel plans became a place of restoration and new beginnings. But perhaps the most rewarding moment came 2 years after that confrontation, as I was reviewing applications for our scholarship program. One name leaped off the page: Leo Montgomery. My grandson, now 13, had written an essay about his desire to study business administration and hotel management. He had researched my career and the work of the foundation, and his letter had a maturity and clarity that stunned me. "I know my parents did terrible things to you," he wrote in a neat adolescent hand. "I was too young to understand it at the time, but I know the truth now. I want to make it right, somehow. I want to be the kind of person who builds things, instead of tearing them down, like you did." I sat at my desk, tears streaming down my cheeks, reading those words over and over again. He hadn't reached out for money, or because his parents had pushed him to. He had done it because he had chosen to find out the truth about his family. That afternoon, I dialed the number he had included on his application. "Leo, this is your grandmother." The silence on the other end was so long I thought he had hung up. Then, in a trembling voice, he whispered, "Grandma Helen? I wasn't sure you'd want to talk to me." "Sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking, "I have wanted to talk to you every single day for the last 2 years." We talked for 3 hours on that first call. Leo told me about the divorce, that Mark and Amber's marriage hadn't survived the financial pressure and public shame, and that he lived mostly with his father, who was finally beginning to understand the weight of what he had lost. Lily, he said, was still angry and confused, but she had started asking questions too. I didn't push for a quick reconciliation or demand apologies. I just listened as my grandson told me about school, his friends, and his dreams for the future. When he asked if he could visit, I said yes without a second thought. The day Leo walked into my penthouse was one of the happiest of my life. He was taller than I remembered, with Mark's dark hair and eyes that held a kindness I hadn't seen in his father in decades. We spent hours looking through photo albums, and I told him stories about his grandfather and about building the business that might one day be his legacy if he wanted it. "Grandma," he said as we watched the sunset from my balcony, "I'm so sorry we hurt you. I know I was just a kid, but I should have known better." I pulled him into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and feeling the steady warmth of this boy who had found his way back to me. "You were exactly the kid you were supposed to be," I answered. "None of this was your fault." Now, 5 years after that terrible vacation, I wake up every morning in my beautiful penthouse with nothing but gratitude. Leo comes over every weekend, working part-time at the foundation and learning the ropes just as I did decades ago. Lily has started calling from time to time, and those cautious conversations give me hope for what's to come. On my 77th birthday, Mark sent me a letter. This time, it was a real apology, full of sincere regret and acknowledgement of the damage he caused. He didn't ask for forgiveness or for money. He just said he hoped that one day I might want to see him again. I haven't made a decision. The damage he did was deep, and trust that is broken like that is not easily rebuilt. But seeing Leo grow into a man of integrity makes me think that maybe redemption is possible, even for those who have fallen the furthest. I learned from Leo that Amber moved out of state and remarried quickly. She has had no contact with me or the children, and frankly, that is probably for the best. Some people are simply toxic, and the healthiest choice is to remove them from your life completely. The Serenity Shores Resort is thriving under Sarah's management, and the foundation has helped over 2,000 seniors reclaim their lives with dignity. I still walk through the lobby sometimes, remembering that awful week when I felt so small and powerless. But now, when I stand in that marble space, I don't see it as the place where I was humiliated. I see it as the place where I finally stood up for myself, where I understood that I did not have to accept cruelty just because it came from family. The greatest lesson I've learned is this: you teach people how to treat you. For years, I taught Mark and Amber that they could take advantage of me without consequence, that my love came without the requirement of respect. When I finally set boundaries and demanded the respect I deserved, everything changed, not overnight and not without pain. But eventually, at 77, I have never been happier. I am surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give them. I go to sleep each night knowing I am loved and respected, and I wake up each morning excited for the day ahead. It took me far too long to learn that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you were born into. Mark and Amber thought they were teaching me a lesson when they shamed me in that hotel lobby. They were right about one thing. I did learn something that week. I learned that I am worth fighting for, even if I have to be the one to do the fighting. And that made all the difference. The story we have told is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hopes that someone might listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I am very curious. If it were you, in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to confront it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. In the meantime, on the final screen, I'm leaving you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you, they will surprise you. Thank you for joining me until the end.